On this Hannity interview, Dick Morris talks about his new book, Screwed, available on the Pushback Now carousel.
They passed the START treaty, Sean, lame duck session.
Yep.
I believe that he is going to sign a series of treaties that will bind the United States hand and foot for decades and get them ratified by the lame duck Senate. One of them is coming up for ratification in June. It's called the Law of the Sea Treaty, LOST, lost. It provides that the United States is obliged to share half of its royalties from oil drilling and mineral drilling out to 200 miles with a newly created UN-based seabed authority, which will distribute the money as it wishes. We have one vote out of 160 to 160 nations.
Why isn't anybody, and I read this in the book, I'm thinking, why isn't anybody stepping up and saying what you're saying in this book? Because this has been out there for a while.
All of these have a fig leaf. The fig leaf here is, oh, freedom of the seas. But the point the conservatives make is the United States Navy does a very good job of guaranteeing.
Exactly, and those are our territorial waters. And
I'll tell you something even worse. In this treaty, it provides that the Seabed Authority may take action to prevent pollution of the ocean. Pollution includes thermal pollution. This authority could ban carbon emissions in the United States so we don't heat up the ocean.
It's unbelievable.
And by the way, I ought to note that the Republican who's going to be leading the fight for this treaty is Richard Lugar, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Yeah. And the reason they're ratifying it in June, not today, is he didn't want to have to defend it until his primary, which is tomorrow, is over.
I don't want to shortchange.
I urge everybody to defeat Lugar.
So this is important, the Law of the Sea Treaty. That's only the beginning of this. Let me just give a quick list here, and then I'll let you go off on any of the ones you want. Taking away the right of Congress and the President to go to war. This is a constitutional issue at this point. Similarly, holding the President, cabinet members criminally responsible if they do it without UN approval, limiting the right of the U.S. Navy to keep the seas open, royalties for offshore oil and gas, sharing all of this technology, and it goes on, and the list gets longer and longer.
It's incredible. I'll give you another example. You alluded to it. The International Criminal Court. We are the only country in the world that's not a member of it. And at some level, it's okay. It's got the fig leaf. It goes after war criminals and human rights abusers. But they include in their treaty the definition of a new crime called aggression. And aggression is defined as going to war without UN approval. And the President, Vice President, Secretary of Defense are personally, criminally liable for imprisonment and trial in front of the ICC court. When Bush was going to go to Switzerland, he canceled the trip because they threatened to arrest him.
Yeah, it also prohibits the U.S. from deploying anti-missile defense systems, strategic
What it does there is, this is the sneakiest thing. You know how liberals have always not wanted us to have a missile defense,
right?
Because they claim we'll do a first strike. And so what the Europeans did was they got together and said there's too much debris in outer space, too many things floating around. It's litter, and it could crash into satellites and stuff. And they passed a code of conduct in outer space that says no country may launch a missile or a satellite that contributes to debris. That means we can't send up anti-satellite satellites. It means we can't send up missile interceptors. The only way we have of neutralizing North Korea and Iran if they get the bomb is space-based missile interceptors. Absolutely. This treaty would prohibit it. And Hillary, in January, the Deputy Secretary of State, Ellen Tauscher, announced we were not going to pursue negotiations on this. Hillary overruled her and now is negotiating this treaty.
This is how deep this goes, because we're only touching the surface, and that's why you're going to have to buy Dick's book to
get the Small Arms Treaty.
Well, let me give you, let me just lay out three more things. It would prevent, literally, the American export. It would force the American export of weapons, our weapons that we develop and our technology to other countries. It would have jurisdiction over firearms in the United States, prohibit, as I said, deploying the anti-missile defense system, and force America to give aid.
Yeah, that's the most.
Redistribute wealth to foreign countries, not even within our own country.
And within our own country to welfare. There's something called the Rights of the Child Treaty, which Britain, for example, is a signatory to. When Cameron wanted to cut welfare benefits in Britain, The Rights of the Child advocate sued him, saying he wasn't allowed to do it because of the Child Treaty, which obliged him to give children certain basic levels of food, medicine, clothing, and everything. And the treaty provides that rich nations have a legal obligation to provide poor nations with enough aid.
So now we're going to spread wealth around the world?
You're going to see,
as if we're not overtaxed now?
You're going to see lawsuits in the United States enforced by U.S. district courts that require us to increase our foreign aid budget. And let me say this. A foreign treaty under the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution is equal to a constitutional amendment. You can't repeal it. You can't override it. You have only two ways of getting out of it, a constitutional amendment or be let out of it by the other 180 countries.
All right, so it's a very subtle title. It's called Screwed, and it's out in bookstores today?
Today.
All right.
And it also deals with how China is screwing us. It rebuts the argument that they won't lend us money. Yeah. It gives a whole new strategy for dealing with Pakistan. And it talks about how Dick Gephardt, the former minority leader, now is in the tank to the Chinese, having run his entire political career opposing China.
Wonder how much he's getting paid.
A lot, we tell you.
All right.
He had to disclose
PBN for news that affects America. Join us on our live show at pushbacknow.com.